Hello, welcome to Empowering Women. I'm Christine Lucas. Today I have with me Katharine Esty, who is a social psychologist, an organizational consultant, and a psychotherapist, and has served for 20 years for IBIS Consulting Group. IBIS Consulting Group is an organization that consults in the area of managing change for women's empowerment, leadership, and strategic planning. And today she's here to talk about her new book, $27 and a Dream, which is a fantastic journey about the work of a man named Muhammad Yunus. Thank you so much for being here on Empowering Women today.
Well, I'm just delighted to be here, Christine. It's really a great experience.
Great. So I know we're really eager to hear about your book, but before we get to your book, I'd like to provide our viewers with a little bit of insight on exactly who you are. Now, I know your bio says that you are a social psychologist, an organizational consultant, a psychotherapist. So can you tell us a little bit more about what you do in these roles, or what you've done?
Yes, and I haven't done them all at once.
Right.
So right now I have a small psychotherapy practice, but I started out as a stay-at-home mom. I had 4 boys.
Wow.
And for 9 years I was into that model, but I did do some sniffing around on what would be my career, and I decided to become a social worker, and that took me into psychotherapy and community mental health. Mm-hmm. Then I went back to graduate school and got a degree in social psychology because I got interested in organizations and what was happening in organizations, and especially women's issues. And I worked for a consulting firm, and then I started my own business with 2 other women. And we were determined to sort of make life better for women in organizations. And so we consulted to universities, a lot of corporations. I had a lot of adventures then. I went on an oil tanker to Alaska,
Wow.
consulting to an oil company.
So these were all women-based business or women-owned businesses that you would consult for?
No, we were a women-owned business,
I
but
see.
we consulted to corporations like Navistar and GE and Exxon Shipping Company, and regular corporations, but we were bringing in the women's issues. They were trying in the 80s to give a fair, square deal, or a square
the playing
deal.
field a little bit.
So I did that for 20 years, had that consulting firm, and I was an organizational consultant, but my expertise was I was called a social psychologist because I understood how organizations worked and how you made them more effective, what you needed to do. So I brought that expertise to my consulting. And it was a woman-owned business, and we branched out over the years to different kinds of things and would work on strategic planning. But basically, it was to empower women in organizations, and there were very few women back in the 80s,
sure.
and very few at the top.
How was it for you personally as a woman, balancing being a mother of 4 boys, a wife, a career woman, traveling, volunteering? That must have been quite a hectic schedule for you.
It was. I mean, I'm the kind of person that actually can juggle quite a few things. I mean, suddenly I can do about 4 or 5, but you add the last one and I start to jam. But
right.
Up to that point, I'll click along doing a lot. And my kids were, since I had been a stay-at-home mom, when they were very small, I was at home.
Sure.
And then by the time I was actually in my consulting firm, they were older.
How about they were like
in high school,
teenage years,
yeah.
a little bit more sufficient.
And then when I started traveling, they were actually, I was an empty, they were gone.
Perfect.
So it was good. And so I
Yeah.
did my most exotic travel when they were long graduated from college. So it gave me a very fabulous, varied career of being close to home when they were small, and then having some really interesting places that I worked when they were older. And I loved it. And, I didn't want to give up that consulting firm, so I kept at it till I was 70.
What do you think's been the most interesting place that you've traveled to?
Well, I think Bangladesh is probably the most exotic. It's a really difficult country because it's so poor, and the city is one big traffic jam. There are no street maps. Mm-hmm. There are no guidebooks. There's no telephone book, and you're sort of stuck in the middle of this great big traffic jam trying to get to where you're going. And it's
culturally, I imagine the oppression, especially on women at the time.
The oppression was horrendous. And that's what I was particularly interested in. And this was probably the most backward country I had ever seen, where women in the countryside were particularly they were confined to their homes. Yeah, sure. They were not allowed to look at any men or have any men outside the family look at them. So they couldn't go to market or go see friends or anything. They just stayed in their homes, the family compounds. So it was and they couldn't be seen by anybody. So it was really, and they weren't educated.
Right. Experiences like that just make us feel so grateful for what we have and what we have access to, and it's very humbling.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think it changed me completely. Every time I have a little complaint, like, oh, I have to go to the dentist.
Right.
I think of the dentist in Bangladesh who sits in a park on a rug and with a pair of pliers. It makes me glad not to be a Bangladeshi woman.
Well, so tell us a little bit about how you got started writing. I know this is not your first book. You wrote another book prior to this one?
Yeah, I've written 2 other books, but sort of 30 years apart and everything. The first one I wrote in my 30s, and it was did some research on gypsies. It was when I started it when I was a stay-at-home mom, and just wrote it from my house and got it published, and I was thrilled. And then I wrote it when I was in the consulting firm at IBIS. We wrote a book that was called Workplace Diversity, a guide to managers who were really trying to bring in people of color and women. So that was more a how-to book. And I wrote that in '95, I think. And then more recently, when I sold my consulting firm and I picked up a little psychotherapy practice, I'd let that go for the 20 years I was consulting. And then I joined a writing group, which has been my fabulous support as I wrote this book. And it took me about 4 years to write this book. But I had decided at the time, I was about 75, I said, what I really want to do, what my passion is now at this point, is to write this book about Muhammad Yunus, this guy that nobody knows who he is.
Right, so the name of the book is $27 and a Dream. And it's about Muhammad Yunus. So how did you meet him? Can you tell us a little bit about Muhammad?
Sure. Well, I had met him when I was in my consulting work in the 90s. In 1994, I was sent to Bangladesh, and I was sent to interview this banker. I had never heard of him, but I soon was. When I met him, I was totally bowled over. He was unlike anybody I had ever met in my life. First of all, he didn't look like a banker. He was dressed in a woven shirt or a tunic. Traditional garb. He told me how he saw that the women in the countryside were never allowed to touch money. Most of them had never even held a piece of money in their hands. And he believes that everyone can be an entrepreneur. So he started lending money to these poor people when no bank would do that, because they said, well, you have to put down collateral.
Right, and of course, they don't have collateral.
They don't have collateral. So he started lending money to them, and that soon took off because he showed that they would pay back. He trusted them.
Wow.
And the $27 in a Dream, that's his sort of eureka moment. He learned that there were 42 people in one little village that were really enslaved by the moneylenders, who they were charging them 200% interest, and they had to give every day. They had to give the little bit of money to the people, and they never could get rid of their debt. And he realized that he could free 42 people from their lifelong debts with just a total of $27. So he took that out of his pockets, more or less, and changed their lives forever, because they could then start to make a profit because they didn't owe anything to anybody anymore. So
sounds like an amazing man. So how well known is he? You say that he's not very well known in the world.
Well, in the world he is. I mean, he won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2006, which at that moment everybody knew his name, but Americans, don't remember foreign names that much. But then he won Obama gave him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And then just this year, the Congress awarded him the Congressional Gold Medal. And there are only 7 people in the world that have that triple crown, so to speak.
Wow,
and it's people like Nelson Mandela and Mother Teresa. So he really is revered in the world, but he's just not a household word yet. And that's what my goal was. I thought, I'll write this book and get this story out.
Oh, that's interesting. So he sounds too good to be true. He really does. So what are some of his weaknesses?
Well, that was part of my other sort of a secret motive of writing the book, because he seemed just too good to be true. He's charismatic, he's warm, he's funny, he's accomplished, he has all these achievements. So I thought, well, there must be some flaw and I think he did have, he doesn't really have any weaknesses. That's what I found out.
Wow, that's interesting.
I kept looking for them, and I talked to people, and I read. A lot of people criticize him, and he does get. The criticism makes news because people they don't like somebody who's that good.
Sure, people want to pull
somebody down.
Exactly.
So there's people allege that he was, he did some fraudulent things, but people, when they check in, he hasn't. He lives a very simple life. He has no second and third, fourth house. He has no huge salary, no fortune. He lives very simply and with integrity,
simply and with integrity.
Yeah.
So important.
And he's changed the world, which to me, with this concept of small loans to women, the microcredit, he's been able to change the whole way the financial services are done. So he's done that just as a person, a sort of middle-class person working and starting his own kind of banking that turned banking upside down. So he's been pretty amazing. And I end up saying he has weaknesses, like he's a workaholic. I told him that once. I said, I think you're a workaholic. And he gave me a big frown.
Oh, no.
But he says, well, that's what I enjoy doing. I do work all the time. So but he says, that's what I want to do.
Right. And I wonder what that cost him.
Yeah, a lot, because his first wife didn't like Bangladesh, and so when they had a child, she left. And he was kind of busy after that, working and trying to prove that the poor would lend to more and more people, that get his model approved.
And I'm sure there was an amount of that he didn't get back.
Oh yeah.
He probably lost a good amount of money in the beginning, for sure.
Right. When he started, he put his own money in, and he never made big bucks. But
that wasn't really his MO.
No, that he didn't care about that at all. It's not about the money for him, and he was. So what it's cost him, I think, is that he hasn't had connection with his families as much as his brothers. When I talk to them, they'd say, well, we don't really see him all that much, but we talk on the phone. And his second marriage was arranged. I think his friends thought he was too busy to have any courtship. So and I at first was shocked by that he would accept it, but
it's a cultural thing.
It was a cultural thing, and he did get married again and have another daughter. So he has two daughters, but.
And those are the sacrifices that great people have to make in this world to make a difference.
And he also had one more thing, that his prime minister, I think, got jealous of him because she thought she should get the Nobel Peace Prize, and he was the one that got it. And he had made probably an unfortunate bid for politics. She was in prison for corruption, and while she was there, he put his hand out and said he was going to start a political party. Well, she's never forgiven him, and so she's got the government machinery against him, and he's always been interested in private business doing it, and that seen government as just slowing things down. So she finally got him ousted from his position as managing director of his bank, the Grameen Bank, and so he now, he got just recently, 2 years ago, got ousted. So now he's just as busy as ever, but.
Sure. And so what did he ever do with the politics? Did he ever go forward with that? Or
no, he just, the minute he saw that he wasn't going to be getting a huge following, he stepped right out and stopped. And he's, but it had made her angry, and she just wasn't going to let go. So finally it was the Supreme Court that said he was too old to be managing director, that their government banks, you had to quit when you were 60. Well, he was now 70.
And that's exactly what he's trying to bring into light in the world.
So
opposite.
I know.
Goodness. So what makes your book such a great read? It sounds so fascinating.
Yeah, well, his story is amazing, because I was interested just both in the kind of what he did, how he could be so successful, how did it all happen? And he had all kinds of down points and crises and obstacles and roadblocks. And then he had, some amazing kind of small miracles that happened for him. And
like what kind of miracles?
Well, every time he'd look like he was going to be nowhere, and he couldn't get his bank to be recognized as an independent bank, the person that he'd done work with 30 years before would suddenly become finance minister and would whisper to the then prime minister, let this happen. And,
sure, divine intervention.
Yeah, and so he got to get his bank. And, but he's had betrayals too, and these sort of it's ups and downs. So there's that storyline that's fascinating. I, as a social psychologist, was also interested in, well, can one person change? He got this idea accepted all around the world. Many of us would like our ideas to be accepted more broadly, but he actually did it. So I was interested, what did he do and how did he do it? And then in the book, I tell what it was like for me. You know, I was like going as just a person alone, trying to understand him and get to know him and react to him. And so in the book, I tell what it was like for me. And it's funny, a lot of my readers say to me they love those parts where I tell about going to a meeting at one point of the people that borrowed from the bank, the people that had loans, and what it was like to see poor people in Bangladesh. And I tell the story of how we drove out into the countryside and then we had to walk like an hour to get to a little village meeting. Wow. It was a tin-roofed shed, and I could hear as I walked in, there were all these women laughing. I could just hear, and that was I was kind of scared. I thought I don't want to look like a tourist coming to gawk at poor people. So I was feeling somewhat anxious. And I got there, and these women were so nice, and they told me about their small businesses. One had ducks, and another one had cow, and then most of them sold vegetables. And I just saw them, and they were sitting there bouncing babies on their laps and, wrapped up. It was winter for them. It was 50. So they had scarves and mittens over their saris, their bright red, green, yellow saris. And they were sitting there laughing, and they asked me, how many children do you have, and how many grandchildren do you have? And the woman asked me, I said, well, I had 10 grandchildren. And people thought, oh, that's good. They nodded. And then the woman said, but I have 16. And everybody...
It just goes to show we all are the same. Our race is human. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And so it was just that day. And then the woman that asked me how many grandchildren I have, she said, she was kind of like this. She said, I have 1,000 chickens. So she had built her business up. She said, you must come see my chickens. Wow. So I went to see her chickens, and it's in a picture of me and her with her 1,000 chickens is in the book. And it really that day changed my vision of poverty. I mean, I now think of these women joyful, chatting, laughing, sure. and seeing that, first of all, their loans really did change their lives.
That's such a great thing to see.
And second of all, even if you're poor, the people still laugh and have,
it's said that the poorest people on earth are the happiest people.
Right, and at that day, I sort of saw that.
That's interesting.
And it was, it was very moving.
Very. Wow, what an experience. So where can our viewers find your book?
This book is on, and I think the easiest way is to go to Amazon.
Amazon.
Yeah, and it's right there, and it's soon to be an ebook. I think it's going to become an ebook in January.
So great! So people can get it for their Kindles and their
right, their Kindles and everything like that. So it's just about ready to go into that format.
Wonderful. So I just have one more question for you. What advice would you give women today who are entrepreneurs?
Well, I think that's a surprise question.
Yes, it is.
And I think that what I've learned from this whole thing is that to hold on to a dream, and that, people can do, I agree with Eunice, people can do a lot more than they think they can. And I certainly never dreamed that, I'd never even planned on doing anything beyond being a stay-at-home mom. And I think if people hold on to their dreams, they can do a lot more. And it's been true in my life, and I'm hoping that it's true for many more women in their lives, that they can kind of live their dreams.
Wow, that's great advice. So basically what you're saying is we're only limited by what we believe, what our beliefs are. So again, the book is $27 and a Dream, and it's how Muhammad Yunus changed the world and what it cost him. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's been a pleasure to speak with you and learn from you, and I could sit here all day and hear these stories.
Oh, and thank you for having me. It's been great for me to be with you and to think about these issues again and talk about them, and it's been a great experience.
Great, thank you.